Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. I recently had a moment of noticing, as it were, connections and synchronicities. So not that long ago, I did a two-part series on Jack Parsons, which I will link in the video description. But for that series, I researched his childhood, and I also had started reading a book called John Dee and the Empire of Angels, and most recently, I started reading an H.P. Lovecraft anthology, which has a little biography in the beginning. And while I was reading Lovecraft's biography, it hit me how similar it seemed to Parsons and Dee, right? It struck me that all three of these magicians had similar childhoods, backstories, and then themes that would come up in their lives. Across 4 centuries, they all experienced early affluence, which was then shattered. They all had grandfathers who kind of stepped in and acted as surrogate fathers. They were all considered incredibly smart as children with precocious intellects, and they all had lifelong obsessions with non-human intelligences. One answered with what he believed to be angelic tables, one with cosmic horror, and one with rocketry and sex magic. Yet all 3 became gateways through which the future poured. And what I mean by that is that all 3 of them had a great influence on the modern world as we know it, right? They all were seemingly ahead of their time as well. John Dee was born in London to a wealthy Welsh family. His father, Roland, served as a gentleman at Henry VIII's court and even dined with the king. However, Roland was repeatedly fined, and he was even briefly imprisoned at one point for political missteps, and the Dee family fortune pretty much evaporated. From the age of about 10, young John Dee was sent to live with some scholarly uncles, and crucially, under the patronage of his step-grandfather, Sir John Perrott, who was rumored to be a possible illegitimate son of Henry VIII. In the great libraries of these men, Dee devoured mathematics, astronomy, Hermetic texts, and at just 15 years old, entered St. John's College, already hailed as a prodigy. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born into a decaying Rhode Island aristocracy. His traveling salesman father ended up being institutionalized at Butler Hospital for syphilis-induced madness when Howard was just 3. He died in that hospital. Not long after this, the family's money was pretty much mishandled and dwindled until it dried up. Lovecraft was raised in the crumbling mansion of his maternal grandfather, Whipple Van Buren Phillips, a book-loving industrialist who had a house filled with books and encouraged Lovecraft, who was reciting poetry at 2 years old and wrote cosmic horror tales before adolescence to, read these books. Despite what people say about Lovecraft being a materialist, I do believe he was a magician, even if he was channeling things unconsciously. John Whiteside Jack Parsons grew up on Pasadena's Orange Grove Boulevard, or Millionaire's Row, an heir to a plumbing supply fortune. His father abandoned the family after World War I, and in the 1929 stock market crash, most of the family's remaining wealth was lost, while his mother spiraled into depression. For long stretches, Parsons lived with his indulgent maternal grandfather, Walter Whiteside, in the great house where, as a boy, he had the run of a vast library, and he was also free to play in the backyard and to blow things up, right, with homemade explosives and rockets from the age of 12. Each of them lost a parent to either abandonment or madness, and each was handed the keys to a vast private library by a grandfather. Each transformed childhood loneliness into acts of creation. Dee spent 30 years in dialogues with entities he believed to be angels, receiving the Enochian language that is still used today in Western ceremonial magic. Lovecraft externalized his dread of heredity and the infinite into the Cthulhu mythos, which is now a globally popular mythology and even has its own magical system thanks to Crowley acolyte Kenneth Grant and his Typhonian magic. Parsons simultaneously co-invented the castable solid rocket propellant that made the space age possible, and, as head of Crowley's California OTO Lodge, performed the 1946 Babylon working with L. Ron Hubbard, an explicit attempt to incarnate an entity and open a gate between worlds. This connection doesn't appear to be a coincidence, right? Dee's Enochian system passed through the Golden Dawn to Crowley, who performed visionary workings in the Algerian desert and declared a new aeon. Parsons, Crowley's chosen American lieutenant, invoked the same Enochian calls while trying to tear open the sky above the Mojave Desert. Lovecraft, though he insisted his stories were fiction, repeatedly cited Dee's translation of the Necronomicon. After his death, occultists like Grant fused the mythos with Enochian tables. All three of them died relatively poor and half forgotten, convinced of their failures, and they all appear to be kind of cursed in some way. Dee ended his days in poverty at Mortlake. Lovecraft died broke at just 46 years old, his work preserved only by a few very devoted friends who seemed to be almost like acolytes of a Lovecraft religion. They seem to be like disciples. They're the reason that his work is widely available today. Parsons was blown up at just 37 years old in a lab explosion, dismissed as a crazy person who was a devil worshiper, and yet today, a lunar crater on the dark side of the moon is named Parsons. The Cthulhu mythos permeates world culture, and magicians still recite the Enochian calls that Dee first documented in 1582. All three of them were child prodigies, born into affluent families who later experienced going through the trial of losing their status and their lifestyles, which may be worse than, just having been born poor or middle class. When you're born into a prominent, very wealthy family, you're used to a certain lifestyle, and then that's taken from you. That is a difficult trial to go through. They were all partly raised by grandfathers who provided them with access to vast libraries. And that pattern or archetype repeats so precisely across the centuries, it seems to me that they were being guided by forces much greater than themselves on their journeys across the abyss. I do not think it is a coincidence that they all had this similar background and childhoods, and then the same influence that we see today. That just strikes me as not a coincidence, shall we say. And unfortunately, I think that if you look at the trials that they went through, besides the things that they have in common, if you just read about them, it does seem like they tapped into something demonic, which ended up having a ripple effect in their lives, kind of driving them crazy in a way, and sort of their lives being destroyed. But then posthumously, after their deaths, they are revived, right? They sort of get the recognition that they never got in their own time, and have this outsized influence on the modern world. So those are just my thoughts. I thought it was interesting, like, reading about all of them. Oh wow, this is familiar. This reminds me of, this person and this person. All very interesting. But I'm interested to know what you guys think, and I hope you all have a good day.